I remember one night in particular, nothing dramatic, just a regular weekday. I was driving home after work, traffic moving slow in that tired end of day way, radio low enough that I could barely follow the song. And I had this weird passing thought that I almost ignored. It wasn't stress, it wasn't panic, it was more like noticing. I realized that keeping up with things, rent, food, the way my life looked, never actually felt like pressure. That's what surprised me. There was no moment where I felt squeezed or forced. Everything felt reasonable, normal. Each decision made sense on its own. A little nicer apartment because it felt appropriate. Eating out because everyone was tired. Paying for convenience because life was busy. None of it felt reckless. And that was the problem. When nothing feels heavy, you stop checking how much weight you're carrying. I trusted that feeling of this is fine for years, without ever really asking what it was quietly costing me. For a long time, I thought keeping up meant trying to impress people. Flashy stuff, cars you couldn't afford, clothes with logos, but that wasn't it. For me, it showed up in much smaller moments. Someone would suggest grabbing food after work, and I'd say yes without even thinking about it. We'd split the check evenly, even if I ordered less, because that's just what you do. No one ever said the words keep up. Nobody pressured me. Everyone just moved together like a current. And I went with it because it felt easier than being the one who slowed things down. At the time, I told myself it didn't matter. It was just dinner, just coffee, just another small yes. But looking back, I can feel this quiet tension I didn't name back then. Paying a little extra to avoid feeling out of place. Spending not to impress, but to belong. And that's harder to notice because it doesn't feel like weakness. It feels like being easygoing. I remember when I moved into a nicer apartment and told myself it was just the natural next step. Not luxury, not flashy, just a little better, a little quieter, a little closer to work. It felt grown up, responsible even. The rent was a few hundred more than my old place, but everyone I knew around my age seemed to be paying something similar. That number had started to feel normal. I didn't frame it as keeping up. I framed it as aligning with where my life was supposed to be. At the time, it felt like progress. Looking back, I can see how much meaning I poured into that decision. It wasn't about space. It was about not wanting to feel behind, about matching an invisible timeline I never consciously agreed to. I didn't feel stressed signing the lease. I felt relieved, and somehow that relief made the cost disappear from my mind. Cars worked the same way for me. I didn't dream about sports cars or luxury brands. I just wanted something decent. That word carries a lot of weight. Decent means reliable, respectable, appropriate. I remember sitting in a dealership, nodding along as monthly payments were explained, telling myself it was manageable. And it was. That was the thing. Nothing felt tight. A few $100s a month slid neatly into the budget. I didn't feel reckless driving off the lot. I felt settled. Like I'd checked a box. Only later did I realize how easily a 5-year commitment can start with a shrug. How a monthly number, once it feels normal, stops feeling like a choice at all. It just becomes part of the background noise of your life, humming along quietly, asking for nothing but consistency. Subscriptions crept in the same way, one at a time. A streaming service here, a music app there, cloud storage, premium versions, little upgrades that promised ease. None of them felt like keeping up. They felt like staying current, staying functional. Each one was under $20, sometimes under 10. I barely noticed when they hit my card. And because nothing ever broke, nothing ever demanded attention, months went by, then years. It wasn't until I actually listed them out one night that I felt something shift. Not panic, just irritation. Like realizing you've been leaking a little energy every day and never bothered to find the source. Canceling felt like effort, so I didn't. Not because I loved them, but because of nothing felt urgent enough to stop. I did the same thing with upgrades, phones, headphones, little tech improvements that promised smoother days. I told myself I wasn't chasing the newest thing. I just didn't want to feel outdated. There's a difference, I used to think. The payments were small, $20 here, $30 there. It felt harmless, especially spread out monthly. What I didn't see at the time was how often those decisions were driven by quiet insecurity instead of actual need. I wasn't excited, I was relieved not to feel behind. And that's harder to catch because relief feels responsible, it feels calm, it doesn't trigger alarms, it just slowly raises the baseline of what your life costs. Food might be where I felt this most clearly. Eating out became normal when work got busy. Cooking felt like effort I didn't have energy for. Ordering in felt like a reward for getting through the day. I told myself it balanced out. Some weeks were better than others, but when I finally did the math, it landed heavier than I expected. $8 extra here, 15 there. 3 times a week turned into hundreds a month without ever feeling indulgent. That's when it started to bother me. Not because of the food, but because of how easily tiredness had become something I paid to escape. Convenience didn't feel like luxury, it felt like survival. And that made it feel justified. Credit cards blurred everything even more. I wasn't drowning, I wasn't panicking. I carried balances, but they were manageable. Minimum payments felt small. Interest was invisible as long as I didn't look too closely. I told myself I was handling it. And in a way I was. But there's something unsettling about how calm debt can feel when it doesn't scream at you. It just sits there growing quietly, fed by your ability to tolerate it. As long as nothing blew up, I didn't feel urgency. I confused stability with progress, and that misunderstanding stuck with me longer than I like to admit. Social media didn't help, even though I didn't think it affected me much. I wasn't jealous exactly, I just absorbed things. Trips, renovations, new routines. It subtly reset what felt normal, what felt expected. Nobody told me to spend more. I just started seeing more spending as part of adult life. Informational almost. And once something feels normal, questioning it starts to feel unnecessary. I didn't resent anyone for it. I mostly resented how easily I let my own standards drift without noticing. Then there were the bigger social moments, weddings, birthdays, group trips, all good things, all meaningful, and all carrying unspoken financial expectations. Flights, gifts, shared houses, dinners out. Saying no never felt like an option emotionally. I could afford them, technically. So I went. I paid. I smiled. But there was this tightness I ignored. A sense that generosity and obligation had blurred together. I wasn't being forced. I was choosing. I just wasn't choosing freely. Work had its own version of this. Coffee runs, lunch habits, casual spending that came with being part of the team. When my income went up, I expected relief. Instead, everything just expanded to fill the space. Better lunches, more convenience, small upgrades that felt earned, raises dissolved quietly. I remember looking at my savings one year and feeling confused. Nothing had gone wrong, and yet nothing had really moved. I justified a lot of this as deserved. I worked hard, I was tired. Spending became a marker of endurance, a way of saying, I made it through today. That logic felt compassionate at the time. Only later did I see how often I used rewards to cover exhaustion instead of addressing it. That realization didn't feel empowering. It felt tender. Like noticing you've been comforting yourself in ways that slowly make things harder. One night, I finally added up a habit I'd avoided looking at. Lunches, coffees, small convenience spending, rough math, nothing fancy, just enough to see the shape of it. A few hundred a month turned into several thousand a year. Stretch that over a decade and the number sat there, quiet and heavy. It didn't accuse me, it didn't shame me, it just existed. And that was somehow worse. This was the part I didn't want to look at first. Because once you know the number, you can't unknow it. Avoiding the math had been a form of protection. Not laziness, fear. Fear of seeing permanence where I'd assumed flexibility. I wasn't scared of being broke. I was scared of realizing how long I'd been drifting. I kept telling myself I was fine. And I was, technically. Bills paid, life functioning. But there's a difference between being stable and feeling free. I normalized a low-grade unease because nothing was urgent enough to demand change. Over time, that unease became familiar, almost comfortable. That realization sat heavier than any single expense. Sometimes I'd feel resentment when savings didn't grow. Not dramatic frustration, just a dull disappointment. And eventually I had to admit it wasn't bad luck, it was accumulation. Thousands of reasonable decisions stacked neatly together. That's a humbling thing to face because there's no villain, just patterns. There were conversations I never had with friends, with myself, about limits, about discomfort. Silence kept everything moving smoothly, but smooth isn't the same as right. Avoiding awkwardness had a cost too. Looking back, keeping up never felt competitive. It felt automatic, like drifting with traffic instead of choosing a direction. Momentum is comfortable that way, until you notice how far you've gone. A lot of my spending was tied to who I thought I was becoming, the adult version of myself I wanted to align with. Belonging is expensive and also deeply human. I don't hate that version of me. I understand him. Now, sometimes I sit alone, bank app open, not panicking, just noticing. Nothing is broken, but something feels unfinished, and I don't rush to resolve that feeling anymore. I just let it sit, heavy and quiet, like a number you finally wrote down and didn't look away from.